Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with the Runeterra Reforged PBE rundown. If this is your first new set, the way this works is this is going to be a rundown of a lot of the stuff that you can expect on PBE, knowing that PBE is our time where we change things, address issues, fix bugs, things like that. The team got really ambitious. There is a lot going on in this set, and PBE in particular is going to be a time where we know the balance isn't perfect, we know the bugs are going to be there. We're taking some risks with some augments that honestly we may disable if we find they're not working. So it's going to be a pretty big PBE, so don't come to PBE if you're looking for a perfectly polished and balanced game. That's not what you're going to find here. You're going to find a little bit of a mess, but for those that are willing to put up with that and willing to help us put the final polishes on the set before it goes out, PBE is definitely for you. So this is going to be a rundown of everything you can expect. Before we get started, big shout out to the entire team who worked on this. The TFT team has grown and it's getting really, really big. And so a lot of people have put their heart and soul into making sure that everything looks good and works and can be played. So big set, a lot of people. Just remember that TFT is growing. So huge shout outs to the entire team that put this together. So with that, let's jump in and talk about some of the stuff you can expect in Runeterra Reforged. So the first thing to note is that we've got some big quality of life changes. Things that honestly some of you might be saying, oh, about time, should have been there for a long time. But it's part of making TFT even better as we go. And the first one is the inspect panel. So anytime you inspect a champion, on the right side, this new menu is going to appear. And you can see it has the ability like it always did before, but also a recommended position. So if you're, not sure where a champion like Samira goes, frontline or backline, it'll tell you. And so that can help with things like Annie in the past, who could have been a damage dealer, could have been a tank. It'll also show their range, which is nice, their items that they have equipped. And a nice thing here is their item roll. So this, for example, you can see Samira is an attack carry. And if you highlight that and you're new to TFT, it will show you some recommended items. So these are items that, can generally work. They're not going to give you the best in slot or anything like that, but it'll allow you to go, hey, Samira can work with these items, and that's cool. There's also the stats with room to add more stats if we need, and a quick sell button. So again, this should help a lot of people who are trying to get into TFT, maybe don't know what a champion does or how they work, and really help them learn that as they go in the game. So pretty cool. Another big thing, and this isn't as true in a set where we're not using skins, but especially in the future, the carousel now has an inspect button. So you'll see these little eyeballs floating on the carousel. If you click those, you can open up the inspect panel and see, oh, Jace is a Piltover gunner. I need him for my 3 Piltover. And you can grab him, and you can check out all the same things you would normally. So full inspect. It's also really great if you're like, you see an emblem, and you're like, which emblem is that? I don't remember. Click the inspect, mouse over. Oh, right, it's Piltover. Cool. So really cool to see. Inspect on carousel, long time coming. There you go. Another really cool one here is, you ever look at a trait and see all these champions, and you're like, who is that 3 cost? I don't know. The picture's so small. And again, especially when they're skins, or maybe you're not as familiar with League of Legends, well, now you can mouse over the champions, and it will tell you their name and their 2 traits. So you can see here on Void, I'm mousing over Rek'Sai, and it lets me know that he's a Void Bruiser, and so I know to look out for Rek'Sai, the 3 cost. So pretty cool. It also includes the emblems that you can get for the trait, so you could mouse over the Void emblem and see that it's there. And if it's a craftable emblem like Shurima, it'll actually tell you the recipe. So you know that the Shurima emblem is craftable. If you need a rod to go with your spatula, there you go. So again, another cool quality of life for our traits. Another new one is we've been simplifying a lot of our tooltips, and we're going to start using symbols a little bit more, as well as sort of reformatting how everything looks. So for example, you can see here Challenger. This used to say, 30% attack speed, 55% attack speed, but instead we're going to be using the symbols to try to teach what that does. So that will simplify the tooltips, make them easier to read, and get people familiar with the iconography of TFT. Bruiser, same thing. You can see health with the heart there. And this even applies to skills, and you can see that we've made the base part, everything above the line, should be a lot easier to digest. So for example, Samira, shoot at the current target and deal 68 physical damage, reduce their armor by 10. And then for all the nerds that really want to understand how it works, you can go below the line and see all the formulas, how they're calculated, and everything like that. So again, should be easier to digest and still has all the information you're looking for. Cool. All right, let's talk about our first set mechanic, portals. So the intro carousel is gone. There's no more intro carousel. You won't get to pick your first starting champion and item. And instead, what'll happen is you'll see 3 region portals. So for example, in this game here, we see the Freljord, which has Hearthhome, the Void, which has the Rupture, and Zaun, which has Glask Industries. And you can mouse over those and get a quick description. So for example, Hearthhome says, forge one of your items into its Radiant version. Or Glask Industries says, when you build items, gain gold. And everyone in the game will vote on which one they want to play. So you'll move your little legend into the portal, and you'll vote. Now, the vote is not a pure democracy. If 7 people vote for Hearthhome and 1 votes for Glask Industries, it can still be Glask Industries. What'll happen is it will randomly select a player, and that player's choice will be the choice. If all 8 of you go Hearthhome, obviously it's going to be Hearthhome. But in that 7-1 scenario, if the 1 person in Glask Industries is chosen, cool. But if there's a portal everybody hates, let's say nobody votes the Rupture, don't worry, it won't happen. So if there are portals that nobody likes, don't worry, we're not going to force that on you. So pretty cool kind of twist on Galaxies for those of you that played during Galaxies, in that everyone gets to kind of vote, and if there's one you don't like, don't pick it. So pretty cool to see. Once the selection is made, your Augment holder will actually transform into the region. So you can see here the Freljord Augment holder. And you can inspect that to get a more detailed description of what it does. So for example, Hearthhome here specifically says on stage 4-5, gain a Masterwork upgrade consumable that lets you upgrade 1 equipped item into its Radiant version. So kind of a cool twist. Not a really warping game, but at 4-5, everyone can get a Radiant item of their choice by upgrading one of their base items. So kind of neat if you like Radiant items. Now, the cool thing about portals is, how many are we shipping with? 30. We have 30 different portals. You can check some of these out on different websites out there. I'll try to go over some of them that I think are pretty interesting, but I'm not going to go over all 30 here. But we also know that some of these are meant to be really light touches for those people that want a kind of pure experience, and some are meant to be pretty transformative and pretty wild. So, for example, Scuttle Puddle's a light one. Every PBE round is replaced by Scuttle Crabs that give extra loot. Cool, nothing crazy, just some extra loot. Whereas like Yumi's Zoom Zone, player combats last 20 seconds instead of 30 before overtime starts. So it puts a fun twist on the game. And so you can read through a bunch of these here. I won't go over all of them. But each one is kind of themed, and each region has their own different twist. For example, Ionia does some cool trait stuff. Noxious is all about extra power. Piltover is a wild one that has to do with augments, and I think this one's interesting because you actually have a chance to vote if you want all augments offered this game to be prismatic, or maybe just the first round will be prismatic. Or for those of you that really hate the augment system, there's even a portal that says no augments will be offered this game. I expect this one to be pretty divisive, but we'll see. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to go back to a no augment game, here's your chance. So pretty neat. Here's a few other ones. Again, like I said, we've got 30, so there's quite a bit. Shadow Isles does some pretty cool stuff. A lot of these will also call back to previous mechanics. So for example, Targon Prime, when you reach 40 HP, gain a blessing from the Targonian gods. Some of you may remember the Radiant Blessing. Pretty similar. Targon in particular is pretty warping. You can get the one that gives you a Tactician's Crown on 2-5 and 4-5, so everyone's playing with a really crazy board here. Void is about chaos, and Zaun is about some gold, so there's some pretty cool stuff you do there. So yeah, definitely check them out, try them all out, and remember, vote on the one you like and hope it gets picked, and yeah, have some fun. So, 30 portals, pretty exciting. All right, Augments. As we've mentioned, Augments are an evergreen mechanic, and they are sticking around. But there are some changes, of course, because as we make each set and we learn things, we make, improvements to the system. So the first improvement here is now Augment rerolls as a whole have been changed to now 1 Augment reroll per slot. So when you're presented with 3 Augments, you can reroll them individually. So for example, in this screenshot here, you can see I've already rerolled my first and second Augment, but I haven't rerolled my third yet. And so I can look at these and go, well, social distancing is my favorite, but let me check inconsistency first. re-roll it, and get something else. So, and this is not limited. Every time you see an augment, you will have a re-roll in each slot. So basically, every augment is now showing you up to 6 that you want to see, which should increase the odds of seeing something that you're interested in. So pretty cool. Now, here's the crazy thing about augments this time. We've been playing with augments for 3 sets now, set 6, 7, and 8. And we've seen Celestial Blessing long enough. We've seen Thrill of the Hunt long enough. It was time for some new augments. So we got rid of almost all the old augments. Only 36 of them were kept. And we think it's 36 of the best. Ones that, honestly, TFT would have felt really bad without. Things like AFK, Cruel Pact, Double Trouble, Jeweled Lotus, Level Up, or Birthday Present, one of my favorite. So you can see the full list here. If an augment is not on this list, it's gone. It's not part of TFT anymore. We felt it was time for a pretty big refresh, and so we made a bunch of new augments. Now, you might be wondering, how many new augments did we make? Well, more than 240. There are a lot of new augments. Now, granted, some are just going to be, slight variations of old classics. Others will be brand new things, maybe things you saw in like the hero augment space, but converted into a normal augment. Now, there's no way I could go over every single augment. There's just no time for this video. It'd be 6 hours long. But the various websites out there, such as like tactics.tools, will have the full list of augments, and you'll get to play with a bunch of them. But here's a few examples. On the silver side, we now have red buff, which says your unit's attacks burn their targets, basically apply burn for 8 seconds. So that's pretty neat. Inconsistency, which is, the opposite of consistency, whereas if your streak is less than 3, gain 2 gold. So that's kind of neat if you wanted to play win-loss, or something like that. On the gold side, Escort Quest. Gain a training dummy, which is some extra health and tankiness if you want. Each round it survives, gain 3 gold. So you can put it in the back, try to gain that 3 gold. It's still an extra training dummy, so pretty interesting way of using it. Or Sleight of Hand. Gain a Thieves' Gloves. Your allies holding Thieves' Gloves gain 30% attack speed. So make lots of Thieves' Gloves. Use this with maybe, say, Lucky Gloves. And you can do some cool stuff. And then on the prismatic side, there are some wild prismatics. I'm not going to lie. Some of these are bonkers. So let us know. Like I said, we're taking some risks here. If we have to nerf or disable some of them, we're ready to. And we know that, to be clear. We know. But we wanted to go into PBE being a little risky. So, for example, I think this one's a little bonkers. But Endless Hordes gain +3 maximum team size. Your units can only hold 1 item. So that means if you're level 8, you now have 11 units, but they all only have 1 item. So pretty interesting. Definitely powers up your traits. Let us know. Or Freaky Friday. Gain an Infinity Force. After 7 player combats, gain a second Infinity Force. So, like I said, lots of new things to try. Some pretty wild ones out there. Let us know. All right, speaking of augments, we also finally took a pass at some of the Ornn items. Now, you don't see it listed here, but I'll call it out now. We've removed the Blitzcrank Grab Ornn item. That is gone. So no more Blitzcrank Grab. No more, there's an Ornn item late game, now everyone has to reposition. That's gone. But there are 5 new Ornn items to play with, such as Deathfire Grasp, which is really good for burning down a really strong tank. Trickster's Glass, which can create another clone and give you a bunch of stats. Hull Crusher, which is a really cool tanky item for your frontliner who's willing to start by themselves. Sniper's Focus, really good for backline, increases damage for each hex between them and their target, so the further they're out of the way, the more damage. Blacksmith's Gloves, which is basically Thieves' Gloves, but for Ornn items, so that's kind of fun. So check those out, as well as all the old classics. They're still around. And then there's even a new augment called All That Shimmers, which gains a Shimmerscale item. So that's pretty cool if you liked those. Now keep in mind, they have been adjusted a little bit. Some have been balanced, nerfed, buffed, etc. to make sure that they're all pretty viable. But if you were a big fan of Shimmerscale items, there's a way to play them, get lots of gold. So yeah, pretty neat. Okay, now crazy enough, not just one mechanic with portals, we have 2 mechanics. This one is called Legends. So this is a pretty wild one, and I know some of you are skeptical, but honestly, I am really excited about Legends, and I'm going to explain why. So before the game even starts, you'll see now you have a Legends menu button, and when you open it up, it will show you a menu with 15 legends. And before the game starts, you will pick one. So for example, you might pick Caitlyn or Ezreal. And when you go into game, that's going to affect the augments that you see for the rest of the game. So, for example, if you choose Urf is all about getting extra emblems. And so on 2-1, if it's a silver game, you'll see branching out, gain a random emblem and a Reforger. If it's gold, you'll get Ancient Archives that you're all familiar with. And if it's prismatic, you'll get Ancient Archives too. And so you can see here on 2-1, we were given Ancient Archives, Caretaker Supplies, and all that shimmers. Now the idea with these 2-1 augments at least, is that they're about the same power level as any other augment, but what it allows you to do is if you've ever had those games on 2-1 where you look at all your augments and you're just like, I don't want to play any of these. This is just not the game I was looking to play. Legends allow you to pick something that you'll be happy with no matter what happens. So for example, Ancient Archives is a personal favorite of mine. It allows me to maybe try to go for 3 Piltover early. We all know I love those econ traits. But in this case here, I see all that shimmers. And so I go, you know what? Even though I've picked Earth, I'm going to go with all that shimmers. And so that's what it allows you to do. Legends allow you to protect yourself from those really bad starts. So keep that in mind when you're picking your legend, and I'll go over what they all do. But each legend kind of lets you pick the style that really appeals to you if none of the other augments are that exciting. Now, each legend also has a choice at 3-2 and 4-2. Again, very much themed around them. For example, Earth at 3-2, you've got Tiny Grab Bag, gain a random component, 8 gold and a remover. Big Grab Bag, gain 2 random components, 12 gold and a reforger. Giant Grab Bag, gain 3 random components, 18 gold and a lesser duplicator. Now, the thing to note about the 3-2 and 4-2 augments is they are slightly weaker than normal augments, very slightly. They are meant to be something that, again, is there as sort of a safety net and predictability, but they are not in the general augment pool, so you won't see them any other time. And again, they're probably not the thing you're going to take most of the time. Part of their power is in their predictability, because if you know the augment you're going to get, you can plan around that. But it won't always be the strongest choice. So keep that in mind. You know, you can see like Big Grab Bag, for example, is 2 random components, 12 gold and a Reforger. That's around maybe a little weaker than Component Grab Bag. So keep that in mind. But again, it allows you, especially for new players, really good for new players. Maybe you say, hey, pick Earth and make sure you grab all his augments and you'll be pretty powerful. And then you can use it to teach new players how to play the game. But I imagine pros aren't going to be picking these augments that often on 3-2 and 4-2. So keep that in mind. But again, it's always nice to have that fallback in case all the other choices are terrible. So, all right. So like I said, there are 15 to choose from. And let me give you a quick rundown on what they all do. So Aurelion Sol is about scaling to the late game, being incredibly powerful and playing awesome units. So all 3 of his 2-1 augments allow you to get extra XP and reach level 10. So if you're really going to get those level 10s, Aurelion Sol is pretty sweet. Bard is all about gaining even more power when you level up. We've been calling them sort of like quest augments, if you will. But each one basically says when you reach a certain level, gain a bonus. So for example, his silver is when you reach level 6, gain a 2-star tier 3 unit. Or I like his radiant or his prismatic one where it says when you reach level 5, gain a radiant item. And if you hit level 9, get a second radiant item. So kind of cooler than radiant relics, but you do have to hit level 9 to get that power. So pretty neat. Caitlyn is all about board power really early. So if you like win streaking, Caitlyn is a great choice. 1s, 2, 3s gives you some extra units. Stars Are Born are sort of the new Trues 2s, except you get to choose. The first tier 1 and tier 2 unit you buy are automatically upgraded. Pretty neat. Or Starter Kit. This is probably one of the more wild augments that's new. But basically, it'll give you a tier 4 champion, an item they can use, and a 2-star tier 1 champion that shares a trait with them. And then the next 2 stages get a tier 4, that same tier 4 champion again. So it allows you to build your board easier, but you are down a prismatic. And so pretty interesting. I like Caitlyn for early game power. Draven is about risk reward. If you know how to play the game well and you think you're going to crush your opponents, Draven is great because every time you kill an enemy, there's a chance to drop loot. Obviously, the better the augment, the better the loot. But, you know, if you're going to lose streak, don't play Draven. Draven's not going to be for you. So, in a way, like, Draven's the kind of game where if you have 100 health and you're win streaking, this guy's going to go crazy. So, but again, very risky. Ezreal is really good if you like getting a lot of items and, you know, you want to have a lot of different combinations. And so Ezreal basically says at the start of the next X rounds, gain some components. So 2, 3, 5. So, and especially early game, remember, having extra items in the early game is very powerful. That's one of the reasons why we had to remove component grab bag from 2-1 originally. So Buried Treasures 2 ends up being pretty strong, being up 3 components compared to everybody else. So pretty neat. Again, if you like items, pretty basic. Lee Sin is about refreshing your shop for the perfect units. You could play it as a reroll comp, or you could play it as a level up comp. On a roll, whenever you start up a champion, gain a free reroll. Trade sector you all know and love. And a really cool one here is called Shopping Spree. When you level up, gain a number of free shop refreshes equal to your level. So like when you hit level 8, gain 8 free rerolls. Pretty cool. So you get a lot of rerolls and end up with a pretty strong board because of all those extra rerolls. Master Yi. This is an augment, this is a legend that if you like really good late game boards, Master Yi's for you. The augments start out pretty weak, you know, gain 5% attack speed, which that's terrible. But every round it goes up by 1. So by the end of the game, it can be as high as like 30, 40%. And that's really good for a gold augment. So if you're willing to play down in power initially, you can end up with a very strong attack speed, you know, composition there. Ornn, if you like those Ornn augments, Portable Forge is back. So get that Portable Forge on 2-1. Latent Forge, which is the equivalent of Portable Forge, it just comes later, so you have to play stage 2 down an augment, but essentially becomes a gold augment later. And then Living Forge, which you've seen before, gain of up to 3 Ornn artifacts in a game, which is pretty neat. All right, Pengu. Pengu is really good if you want to go for like a 5th place and just be like guaranteed, but also you can do some really cool risky things with him. Pengu is about playing it safe, great for beginners. Tiny Titans at 2-1 for silver, which we know is not the best augment, but having 30 health is always nice. Metabolic Accelerator, if you want to try for a risky Piltover loss streak, is always good. And a new augment, Tiniest Titan, where your tactician is small and speedy, heals 2 health after a PvP round, and grants 2 gold per round. So you kind of get metabolic and extra gold. Pretty neat. All right, Tom Kench. I expect this one to be very popular. This is all about the gold. So AFK at silver, rich get rich at gold, and the new hedge fund, which has no interest cap at Prismatic. So if you have 140 gold, gain 14 gold interest. It's pretty wild. There's some pretty cool things. We've got our eye on hedge fund. Hedge fund might be a little too good. Twisted Fate, the gambler, but always stacks the cards in his favor, makes sure you get the exact items you are looking for. So if you compare him to Ezreal, you're going to get less items than Ezreal, but you always have the Pandora's items effect, no matter which one of these you get. And so you'll be able to make sure you get the exact items you're looking for. Pandora's items 2, which gives you 2, and then Pandora's box, which gives you a Radiant item, and then you can also have that Pandora's effect. So if you compare it to Radiant Relics, you don't get to pick the Radiant item because you've still got that randomness, but you gain that Pandora's items effect. So pretty neat. Urf is the one I'm going to be using quite a bit because it always helps me get Piltover. But Urf is all about emblems. We talked about him briefly. The silver is gain a random emblem and a Reforger. Really good for getting in some early direction. And then Ancient Archives and Ancient Archives 2. So, cool. Last ones. Veigar. Veigar is all about doing some big damage. If you like big damage, Veigar's great. Jeweled Lotus 1, 2, and 3. Jeweled Lotus 1 just gives it to the strongest unit. So your strongest unit now has that Jeweled Lotus effect. So pretty good. Jeweled Lotus 2, the one you're familiar with, but has been nerfed. It is not as powerful as it was before. You'll see you're gaining a little less critical strike. But Jeweled Lotus 3 is the extreme version, where all your units' abilities can crit and gain a bunch of critical strikes. So if you like Jeweled Lotus, Veigar's for you. Vladimir is a new one, kind of like Master Yi, except a little more defensive. So instead of gaining attack speed as the game goes on, you trade your little legend health for HP. So for example, if you're down to 10 HP, that means you're missing 90 health. And so 90 times 4 is 360, plus 70 means your whole team is getting 450 health with Transfusion 2. And so your team's going to get beefier and beefier and beefier So pretty cool. And we know flat HP can do a lot of really powerful things. So Transfusion's pretty cool. And then finally is Poro. If you're like, this legend system is not for me, I don't like choosing it, I just want the pure classic game of TFT, Poro's for you. Not my choice personally, but some people don't like legends, they don't like the pressure. So have a Poro. They're adorable. Cool. And those are legends. So like I said, pick the one that you think you're going to have the most fun with. Use it as sort of that safety net. But keep exploring the augment system. So I feel like none of these are going to be the S tier augments, but they're great fallback A and B tier augments. So cool. All right, time to talk about the actual set. We talked about quality of life and mechanics and augments and stuff, but there's actually a whole new set in there too. So let's talk about the traits. Demacia, so obviously based off Runeterra regions, by the way. Demacia says, your strongest Demacians become elite and equip a random radiant item each combat, and then elites also grant armor and magic resist to themselves and adjacent allies, but it can't stack. So for example, if you have 5 Demacia and items on Garen and Kale, Garen and Kale will become elites, and they'll get a radiant item, and it'll show it to you at the planning phase. And it is, it's a radiant, it's not pure random, it'll actually give them a radiant item they can use, so you're never going to get, like, Zerat on Kale. That's just not going to happen. And then anyone touching them gains extra 25 armor and 25 MR. So pretty cool. If you like radiant items, they do some cool stuff. Freljord. We expect this to be a very popular trait. It's one of those splash traits that you can add into a comp. Maybe you're playing Deadeye, maybe you're playing Invoker and can build around this. And after 5 seconds, an ice storm strikes the battlefield. Very much like Tempest, if you remember that. But it does some damage and applies some debuffs. So for example, with 2 Freljord, that's going to apply the 40% armor and MR shred. Sweet. And then if you have 3, they'll also be mono-reaved. And if you have 4, they'll also be stunned. So you can do some pretty cool stuff with Freljord there. Really good splash trait. Ionia is a really big vertical, kind of a complicated one. And the way it works is if you look at every Ionian champion, they have an Ionian bonus that is specific to them. For example, Jin's Ionian bonus is, I believe, 30% AD. Some large amount of AD. Zed's is crit, Ari's is mono regen. It's special to them. And when you put in the trait, that bonus gets activated. So if you've got 3 Ionia, Jin gains 30% attack damage. And then if you have 6 Ionia, Jin gains 60% attack damage. So they each get what they need out of the trait that they're looking for. Now, in addition, every 4 seconds, your strongest Ionians become enlightened. They gain 20 mana, and that bonus doubles. So for example, the Jin we talked about, if he's your strongest champion, that 30 AD becomes 60 AD. And so this can get pretty wild if you've got 9 Ionia, 3 enlightened champions, all getting 270% of their bonus, then it also doubled. Pretty wild bonuses. So does some cool stuff, and each champion can be the star if they want. Noxious is, I think, my favorite beginner trait, and also just really good trait. If you remember Warlord, it's kind of like that, where all the Noxious champions gain some HP, some AP, and some AD. Cool. Now, each time you defeat an opponent in the game, up to 7 opponents, this increases by 10%, up to a maximum of 70% once you've beat everybody. You've conquered them. And so this damage can get really big. You can get a lot of stats. Really good win streak comp. If you can get Noxious in and win streak through 2-5, you've already got the bonus up to 50%. So pretty cool trait, but make sure you try to conquer everybody and conquer the world like a true Noxian would. Void is our big summon trait this time. If you have at least 3 Void in, you get a placeable egg, and at the start of combat, it hatches. If you have 3 in, it's a tiny little Void Remora, good for tanking, nothing crazy. If you have 6 in, you get the Rift Herald, which is pretty tanky and can do a big damage with its charge. And if you manage to get 8, which does require an emblem, Baron comes out. And Baron's pretty insane. If you remember 9 Cultist Galio, Baron's a lot like that. Does some big damage, a lot of cool stuff there. So Void's a pretty great trait if you're looking for summoning some cool stuff. Shurima is all about ascending. Every 4 seconds, Shurimans heal 7% maximum health. After 8 seconds, select Shurimans ascend and gain 40% max HP and 40% attack speed. So they ascend and get bigger. Now at 3, that's only your strongest Shuriman, so 1 champion. But at 5, all your Shurimans ascend. At 7, they all ascend immediately. And at 9, that ascension bonus is even bigger. So pretty cool if you want to get some powerful champions. Really good with Azir, who loves that attack speed. So yeah. All right, Yordle is going to be a reroller's favorite. If you like reroll comps, Yordle's for you. All your units, if you have 3 Yordle in, all your units gain 10% attack speed per star level. So if you have a 3-star Talia with 3 Yordle in, she gains 30% attack speed. It's cool. So it's a team buff. In addition, if you have 3 3-star champions, doesn't have to be Yordles. You could have a 3-star Talia, a 3-star Renekton, and a 3-star Tristana. Your Yordles can become 4-star, which gives their ability a wacky upgrade. So in that case I talked about, Tristana would immediately become a 4-star Tristana. Now each champion is different. For example, Poppy, who normally just shields herself, will in addition gain an AoE knock-up stun. Or Teemo, who normally throws mushrooms, will now throw giant mushrooms. I won't spoil what Heimerdinger does at 4-star, because Heimerdinger is our first 4-star 5-cost. So if you can get that, cool. But yeah, so those of you that like those 4-star champions, pretty neat. So give it a try. Shadow Isles is a pretty neat trait. After dealing or receiving damage 8 times, Shadow Isle champions gain a shield for 8 seconds and become spectral for the rest of the combat, granting them mana regen. So they'll get a big shield to protect themselves and some mana regen. So pretty neat. If you can burst them down before they get their shield up, good for you. But if not, you have a really tanky Maokai or a Gwen doing a bunch of damage, and a Gwen gaining a ton of mana to help her cast more. So pretty neat. All right, I'm going to skip Piltover for 1 second. Zaun is pretty neat. Zons create random chem mods that only they can use. So if you put in 2 Zaun, you'll get a chem mod, and you can apply that to, say, one of them. So let's say you put in Jinx and Warwick, you get a chem mod, and you're like, this would be great on Jinx. You can put it on her. And if you do, it's on her forever. You can't take it off. You can't move it unless you sell the Jinx. So do be careful. Zaun mods are permanent, and they can only have 1. But it's almost like a 4th item slot. It shows up in a separate section, and they can do some pretty wild stuff. It's also why Zaun emblems can be really cool, because it'll allow you to put chem mods on somebody. And if you manage to get 6 Zaun, those mods will become overcharged, giving them another unique bonus. So pretty cool. Targon is a nice splash trait as well. Pretty simple. It's like first aid kit. All your units healing and shielding is approved. So pretty neat. If you've got a lot of healing or a bloodthirster or something like that, put in some Targon, get even stronger. Okay, Piltover, the last origin. Piltover is the economy trait this time. It's the risk reward. If you remember Fortune, it's very much like Fortune. Piltover is about loss streaking. If you want Piltover to be good, you got to lose a bunch, okay? So each time you lose, they'll gain a charge. You'll see the little charge meter, that's the blue one on the left. As you get more and more charges, that's going to power up. So the T-Hex won't get any more powerful while the charges are there, but you'll be building up this big charge. And then when you win, it converts. So let's say you go on like a 12 loss streak, and then you win. That'll convert into energy, and you can see it here on the second picture. That's got 50 energy, and now you've got this giant 4-star T-Hex that does a bunch of damage. Now, what's interesting here is, unlike Fortune, you now have a choice, okay? You can stay Piltover and play with now this giant T-Hex, or you can sell the T-Hex, which will reset it and convert it to a bunch of loot, kind of like your Fortune cash out, and then you can transition comps. So now it's Fortune, but 2 different ways to play it. One is to stay, play with the T-Hex. One is to cash out to a bunch of loot. Now, if you manage to get 6 Piltover, which is very hard, we know that. Like, this is not meant to be easy to get. This isn't a 3-5-7, it's a 3-6 for now. Then every loss counts as 2 losses, which can make you get to some pretty extreme T-Hex numbers. And you gain bonus loot every round. So 6 Piltover is kind of the crazy wild Exodia. If you really want to chase the high risk, high reward, give it a try. It's my favorite trade. I'll be forcing it every chance I get. So Piltover, pretty fun. All right, on the class side, classes are usually our basic thing that kind of teaches you sort of what the champions do, sticks to a role. But keep in mind, they won't do anything too crazy here. So, and for the first time, we don't really have any direct counter classes. There's no Mystic, there's no Vanguard or anything like that. So Bastion is all about being very tanky. They gain some armor and magic resist. Shocking. And it's doubled for the first 10 seconds of combat. So for the first 10 seconds, they're very tanky. And then it wears off and they're pretty tanky. Bruisers, your units gain 100 health. And then Bruisers also gain additional health. So 2 Bruiser will help your team out. Pretty neat. But 6 Bruiser, you can get some big verticals. Cho'Gath in particular, by the way, can stack health. So Cho'Gath with 6 Bruiser can do some pretty cool stuff. Yeah. Challenger is back. They gain attack speed. When the target dies, that increases, and they dash to the next target. So really good to mow people down. Deadeye is a lot like Hunter, for those who remember it. Your Deadeyes gain +1 range, and then every 3 seconds they attack the enemy with the highest % health and deal bonus damage. This can give you some backline access. This can snipe some pretty cool targets. But yeah, Deadeye. Gunner, kind of the opposite. When Gunner's champions attacks, they gain bonus attack damage up to 8 stacks. So you can get up to 40 AD for 2, or, you know, more than 100 at 6. So pretty cool. Multicaster. Multicaster is a very powerful trait if you're willing to play at least 2. Because what'll happen is they'll cast their ability multiple times. It'll have a little bit reduced effectiveness, but for example, Sona's a really cool one because Sona gives her team attack speed. And if you have multicaster, it'll give it multiple times and it will stack. So pretty neat to see. Multicaster's fun. Invoker is our mana regen trait. Every 3 seconds, your units gain mana. So if you have a 2-piece in, get 5 mana every 3 seconds. If you have 4, though, the Invokers get an additional 10, and 6 is a lot of mana. Cool. All right, Rogue. Now, for those who might be wondering, there's no real assassin trait this time. There's no backline jump trait, nothing like that. The way rogues work is they start melee, just like any other thing. When they fall below 50% health, they basically, Edge of Night, they drop aggro, and they will dash to an enemy within 4 hexes, preferring backline. So, when they get to you, they'll already be at half health. So they do have backline access eventually, but there's room to position around it, there's room to play around it, maybe get some CC going. So yeah. And if you have 4-piece, additionally, a rogue's first attack on an enemy bleeds them for 50% of their maximum health as magic damage over 5 seconds. This is a debuff, so if 4 rogues all attack the same target, they only have 1 bleed debuff. You can't stack it, but does allow for some extra damage on these rogues, and it's slower damage, so they're not really going to burst down your backline instantly or anything like that. But yeah, rogues are kind of our sneaky damage dealers this time. Juggernaut, another tank class. Juggernaut champions take less damage as their health decreases, so the lower they get, the tankier they are. Now, the big thing to note is Juggernaut's numbers don't look that impressive by themselves, especially if you compare it to armor and MR. But because it's damage reduction, which is one of the harder stats to get, we've all seen what DR can do on things like Gadgettine before, this can get really insane. So for example, if you have a Nasus with 6 Juggernaut that also has a Gargoyle Stoneplate, a Redemption, and a Bramble, that's going to be really hard to kill because the damage reduction is going to be even more multiplicative. So 3-item Juggernauts with Deepen Juggernaut are going to be some of the hardest to kill things in the game. And keep in mind, Darius and Garen are both damage dealers, so you can get them to be pretty tanky and deal damage. Sorcerer is our big AP class this time. They gain ability power. But what's really cool is when an enemy dies after being damaged by a sorcerer, they deal a % of that enemy's health to another enemy. So, for example, if you have 4 sorcerer in and you kill a unit with 2,000 health, it will shock a nearby enemy for 300 magic damage. Neat. Where this gets really cool is if you have something like 8 sorcerer in, it'll deal 400 damage to 2 enemies, so you get these big shocks. Now, what's really interesting is, let's say you manage to kill Baron as sorcerer. Baron might have 7,000 health, and so that might mean 20% damage. That's 1,400 damage to 2 nearby enemies. So you can get some pretty cool chain reactions. And keep in mind, if that shock kills the enemy, well, guess what? That'll chain again. So you can get some really neat chain reactions if you get lucky. Slayer is back. Pretty basic here. Slayers gain 15% Omnivamp, so it allows them to kind of keep themselves alive. Slayers also deal bonus damage doubled against units below 60% health. So, for example, if you've got 3 Slayer in, they deal 10% bonus damage, doubled to 20 when they're low. So extra damage trait, pretty neat. Strategist, this is a cool one because it's team-wide. At the start of combat, allies in the front 2 rows gain a shield, and allies in the back 2 rows gain ability power. So if you've got 3 strategists in, your front line all gains a 350 health shield, and your back lines gain 30 AP. So pretty cool. Stacks with things like Sorcerer, stacks with the extra shield, so you can run like a Juggernaut and Strategist combo, give them a big shield. It's like built-in lockets. So yeah, pretty neat. All right, and now on to the champions. So a lot of champions. I'm not going to go over every single one and what they do, but some quick rundown here. Samira, backline AD. Tristana, backline AD. Cassiopeia is a good blue buff item holder. She's got 3 traits, so unless you get them all going, she's not really an S tier carry. I don't see reroll Cassiopeia doing that well right now, but not bad. Malzahar, 1 cost. He can actually shred shields a little bit, so he's good utility in Sorcerer and Void, or a good item holder. Jhin, an AD damage dealer, good AD item holder. Cho'Gath, one of the more unique champions. Every time Cho'Gath casts and gets a kill, will gain some HP, and his spell is based on his total HP. So, if you can get him going, he can bite and gain and bite and gain and be some of the tankiest 1 cost you've ever seen. But the thing to note about Cho'Gath's stats is he has very low armor and MR for a tank. Decent HP, low armor and MR. So you kind of have to waste those item slots on like Bramble, Gargoyle to get him going. Maokai, pretty standard tank with some self-healing. Renekton, pretty standard tank with some self-healing. Poppy, tank with some shielding. Kayle is another interesting one. Kayle is probably the weakest 1 cost at the start of the game. At level 6, powers up a bit and becomes pretty decent. And at level 9, actually becomes very, very strong. If you're at level 9 and have a 3-star Kayle, that's the equivalent of a 4-cost 2-star, maybe even a little better. So if you can get a 3-star Kayle and go to level 9, you can have a very powerful unit. So pretty unique archetype for a reroll comp, but also hard to pull off sometimes. Viego, sort of a melee damage dealer. Aurelia is a tank. Do note that Aurelia is a tank. And then Orianna is sort of a support caster. She'll shield an ally, and then that shield will explode, doing some decent damage. But it makes her really bad in 1v1s against ranged opponents, because she'll just shield herself and then do no damage. So, on the 2-cost side, Galio is a tank. Nothing crazy there. Talia does some extra damage. Now, one interesting thing about Talia, and she also has she knocks a person up and then deals damage to them. But her passive says, deal damage to anyone knocked up. So if you have any other knockups on your team, Talia will throw even more rocks at them. And there are a lot of champions in the comp or in the game that have some knockups, so look out for some cool combinations. Soraka heals and does damage. Jinx is a solid AD item holder with some big spells. Kled AD with a big shield that he can remount this time, so if he can survive long enough unmounted, he can remount. Kassadin is a tank, has a bit of a disarm. Kassadin's also one of the champions that still has a hero augment, if you will. There's an augment that changes Kassadin's spell, so be on the lookout for that. Teemo, AP user, throws mushrooms. Swain, AP drain tank, pretty cool. Set is also a tank, does some big damage there. Pretty cool. Ashe, backline utility. Her spread shot will slow enemies for a little bit, so pretty cool. Vi, pretty close to a reprint. Again, frontline. Pretty tanky, though. A lot tankier than her last version. Zed, great AD item holder. And then Warwick is a tank this time. Pretty tanky. Won't do a ton of damage, but will do a lot of self-healing every time he attacks. And scales really well with Juggernaut and Challenger. All right, on the 3-cost side, Darius is back with his dunking. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Echo is pretty wild in that he's a quick cast rogue. And every time he casts, he heals some of the damage he was taken. So he can go infinite pretty well. Akshan with one of the most powerful spells in the game. Very much like a big Caitlyn ult. It can take down some champions if you get a really good snipe with Akshan. Vel'Koz shoots his laser that then splits and can hit up to multiple people. Lissandra freezes an enemy, does some big AoE damage and makes them take a little bit more damage. Karma, great blue buff holder. Her Ionia bonus is AP, so she gets almost like an extra item slot and can do some big damage. Callista is back, but has changed a bit. Last time Callista was around, she threw her little spears and then would pull them, killing the unit, but she didn't have a spell. This time she does. Her spell is impale them with even more spears. So really good at taking down frontline damage. She does true damage, so if you have a super tank, watch out for enemy Callistas. She can tear them apart. Sona, multicaster that gives her team attack speed. Really good if you have 4 multicaster because she'll apply that attack speed multiple times. Rek'Sai, not a tank. Rek'Sai is an AD item holder, so give him something like, BT and Titan's Resolve and Infinity Edge, and he can do some decent damage. Taric, really good tank, also provides your team Targon, which is always good. Jace, backline AD user who gives his team attack speed nearby, so really good for Gunner. Garen is back with his spin, but it's a really unique profile this time, and that he does more damage the more attack speed he has. His spin lasts longer with more AP, and does more damage with AD, so really interesting item builds. I think it's going to take people a while to figure out what the best item build is, but the designers wanted Ginsu Garen to be a thing, so his spin also procs Ginsu's, so give that a try. Katarina, rogue, jumps around, throws daggers, pretty strong. One of the stronger Noxious rogues for sure. So, all right, on the 4-cost side, 4-cost carries this set are really powerful. Urgot is sort of a melee bruiser who carries AD items, does really well, and he actually uses his legs, so as he moves around and tosses people, he can do some big damage. Shen is a very good tank with some great traits. Sejuani, also a really good tank with great traits. Applies true damage with her spell a little bit, and as more people hit. Yasuo is a melee AD user, but applies a good amount of CC, actually, so you can really get in there and fight. Azir is your backline Ginsu's user. Every time he casts, he gets a soldier. Once he has max soldiers, those soldiers hit really hard. So definitely one of the most high DPS champions, but takes a while to scale. Lux has a new laser, very different than her old spell. This laser is concentrated damage on one target. It will melt tanks really well. It also lowers their MR as it hits them. But again, it only melts one target, so it's not going to be that AoE line burst you saw before, but it can do a lot of damage. Really good with a gunblade. Jarvan is your big AoE CC unit, will jump into the back, hit everyone, and knock them into the ground. Nasus is probably your best tank in the game. He will actually steal stats from everyone nearby, so the stronger the enemy is, the stronger he is. Gwen, really good damage dealer, AP damage dealer, so you're going to want that Jeweled Gauntlet, something like a Bloodthirster, and can just do a ton of damage. Scales really well with Slayer and Shadow Isles. Zeri is a backline AD user, really good with Gunner, give her that IE, possibly some Ginsu's. Aphelios is a Deadeye that really likes Ginsu's. He'll be stacking chakrams and over and can do just a lot with his spell. And then Kai'Sa, if you remember 5-cost Kai'Sa, this is pretty similar. Give her a Shojin, give her a Morello, give her some AP items. She'll be dashing around shooting missiles. A little more balanced than the 5-cost version, but overall can do some pretty good damage. And then the 5 costs. Bel'Veth, I'll go over some of the more special ones, but the non-special ones here, we have Sion, who's a Noxious Bruiser. When he dies, he resurrects at full health, losing his spell but gaining a bunch of attack speed. So pretty hard to take down. Ahri is a Ionia Sorcerer. The first 2 times she casts her spell, she'll drain the soul of people and weaken them. And then the 3rd time, she does this massive AoE wave, and if it hits people who have had their soul drained, it does even more damage. And then Cassante, for those of you that remember people like Lee Sin, Cassante will knock people up and out, and if they're near the edge, he will knock them out of the arena. So really good for taking down super tanks. Yeah, so good champion there. On the special side, Aatrox is a Darkin, really good with AD items, so he'll be doing big slams, loves every stat like Titan's Resolve. But what's interesting is when Aatrox or the holder of the Darkin Blade dies, the Darkin Blade is equipped to the nearest allied champion, granting them 450 health and 20% Omnivamp. After being equipped to a champion for 4 seconds, Aatrox will revive upon their death instead. So he'll jump to an ally. So Aatrox dies, jumps to an ally. If they live for 4 seconds, they're now empowered. And if an empowered person dies, Aatrox comes back, items and all. So pretty neat champion. Can power up champions, giving him a 4th item slot. So yeah, kind of fun. Senna has a cool trait called Redeemer. Now, Senna's ult is she shoots her big ult. It does some okay damage and shields everyone it hits, and it basically hits the whole board. It's a big cast. Now, if you have Senna on your team, whenever an ally gains a shield, Senna grants them 8% stacking attack speed for the rest of combat. So a really silly combo here is you play Senna, and you run 3 lockets, and you start with 24% attack speed. Or have a champion that casts shields. There are augments that give shields. So, yeah, you can do some cool stuff with Redeemer if you're looking to do shields. Neat. Belveth. Empress is basically a fancy thing that makes her kit do more. She's kind of similar to the 4-cost Belveth from the last set in that she goes slap, 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 and does a bunch of damage. But when Belveth kills an enemy, they leave behind a Void Coral that she will consume. The first one she consumes, so it's very important to get at least 1 kill with Belveth, will increase her maximum health by 50%, and then further Coral will heal her 20%, so she'll keep healing. And when a Void Coral is consumed, she deals 10% maximum health as magic damage to enemies within 2x's. The TLDR here is that Belveth is good with basically any stat. She's good with attack speed, she's good with attack damage, she's good with tank stats. She's a really interesting champion that she can use anything. So Belveth feels like the one you find at level 7, throw some items on her, and she can do some pretty good work. So, yeah. All right, this is one of the crazier ones. Heimerdinger is a Technogenius. Now, when you play Heimerdinger, you will get a turret right away, just straight up. The Heimerdinger and the turret share stats. They have different spells. Heimerdinger throws his grenade, which stuns, and the turret shoots a big empowered shot. But you can customize this turret any way you like. There are 4 different types of upgrades, and they'll start appearing in your shop as soon as you play a Heimerdinger. And you can purchase up to 3 of them, but they stack. So, for example, you can run 2 Goldenators, which will increase the odds of getting gold on kill, and a Mechanoswarm. Or you could run 3 Self-Repairs, or 2 Shrink Modules and a Goldenator. It's up to you, and so you can customize your turret how you want. A lot of different combinations here. I'm a big fan of 3 Goldenators just because it makes a ton of gold. Probably not the most powerful option, but it's definitely the most fun. So, pretty neat. And then finally, Rise. Rise is crazy. This is a Giovanni special. Rise, his spell changes based on the region the players voted for at the start of the game. So, for example, if the portal everyone voted on at the start of the game is Shurima, then Rise's spell is he summons a gigantic sand tornado that travels across the battlefield, dealing damage and possibly unearthing treasures and gold. But if you pick Shadow Isles, now his spell is all about healing allies and bringing them back to life. So, yes, there are 10 different Rise spells, and if you get Void, it'll pick randomly. So, basically, we made a 5-cost that's 10 different 5-costs. So, a little ambitious. But check out Rise. Really good AP item user. He should always, want things like Shojin, Death Cap, etc. But every time he's different, so see if it's what you need for your comp. But pretty crazy. And that's it. That's every champion trait lot. There's a lot going on here, but honestly, it is one of our most diverse sets ever. There's just so much to do. A lot of cool things that you can try out. Can't wait for you to try it. Like I said, so many new augments, the portals, the champions, the items, etc. It's a lot. It's going to be a ton of fun. I can't wait for you to experience it. It'll be up on PBE later today if you're watching this when it came out. And again, it's PBE. Give us feedback. Let us know. We'll be polishing it for the next 2 weeks, and then it'll go out live, 2 weeks from today. So, yeah. All right, that's going to do it for me. On behalf of the entire TFT team, we thank you, and we cannot wait for you to play the next set. Hopefully you all enjoy it. And yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.